go ahead and start with you, Jen.
Hi guys, my name is Jen McCabe. I am a strategic investor for Foxconn, but my very first experience was building a little consumer robot named Romo. Romo's the only robot I've ever seen better than Romo is Sphera's BB-8, and I'm a huge fan, but I now get to invest in the space that I used to work in on the manufacturing side.
Ian Bernstein. I was one of the original co-founders of Sphero. Started in 2010. We made BB-8, Sphero, and a bunch of other products. Earlier in 2017, spun out a new company out of Sphero to do more advanced robots. Robots for the home and the office. Announced some stuff today, really targeting developers, and eventually moving into the consumer space when enough applications have been built.
I'm Tony Bugabero, co-founder and CEO of Little Star. We went through Disney Techstars in 2015, and we're a platform for premium immersive content. So we do business with all the big studios, Disney, Sony, Universal, all the big broadcasters. They distribute content through our platform and through our apps directly to people who have head-mounted displays. We also deliver immersive content to cell phones and smart TVs and allow you to look around inside cinematic VR content. And we also have a platform, so all of that technology can be integrated into other people's apps. We power about 150 different applications for Discovery, Gannett, Hearst, Sci-Fi. Our tech lives on about 100 million devices, powering immersive content delivery. That's us.
And I'm Silas Adekunle. As you can see, I'm living the hectic life of CES, running from meeting to meeting. So we're combining robotics and gaming. And our booth is over there if you want to see what that really looks like. But imagine you could have a video game character in real life. We're doing that with robotics and then giving you different gaming experiences that you can have with that. So single-player augmented reality gameplay, two-player interaction between two robots, applications in STEM as well, so you can actually learn to code with the robots. And so, primarily entertainment focused, but lots of applications in education as well, which we'll go over to in a bit. And the robots are available now in the Apple stores. We launched that mid of November last year now. So, I've gone through Techstars, went through the accelerator, and we closed that Series A in June. So I guess I've got quite a fresh perspective on what that means for a startup company in the robotics and AR space.
The robots are awesome. I have 4 of them. Thank you, Silas. One of the things I want to talk about first is kind of the pace of consumer adoption. How many of y'all have a robot in your home? Okay, like a handful. How many of you have head-mounted displays for VR? So that's actually a bigger number than I thought. Like, what are your guys' assessments of kind of where consumer adoption's at right now, and where do you think it'll be like within the next 12 to 24 months?
So before Foxconn, I did hardware investments for Tony Hsieh. So I did the Vegas Tech Fund investments early stage, and I invested in Skycatch, which is a drone company, which is still live in San Francisco, focused on the enterprise market. And then I did MetaView, which was called SpaceGoggles.com or SpaceGlasses.com at the time, and had just come out of Y Combinator. That was 4 years ago now. So I've been looking at Meta stuff for the last 4 years. At the same time, I've watched, we watched stuff like the Google Cardboard box and glass kind of come out and try to disrupt the space, but failed to reach beyond low double-digit adoption, with the exception of Google's Cardboard VR. It was the New York Times promotion, which was 20-some% of readership used the glasses. So I think I'm probably still 5 years out, maybe.
Robot guys?
So I would say, certain robots, obviously, like single-purpose robots like the Roomba, iRobot has turned into a multi-billion-dollar company. So on that side, there's some very successful companies. At Sphero, we shipped several million robots, well over 3 million robots, into the consumer space with things like BB-8 and into that STEM category with our Spark product. So it's done really well there. We're seeing, I've been thinking a lot well, since I was a kid, but a lot, even more so, more recently, about how do we put a robot in every home and office? You know, robots that are multi-purpose that can start to do really useful things for us. And our strategy was around, basing it off of how computers got started. And if you look at the computer industry and how that got created back in the 70s, it was just people building computers over and over in their garages, like Steve Wozniak. Really until Apple came along and built a computer that just worked, and you plug it into the wall and 2 wires to your TV. But they didn't go after consumers right away because there was no applications for the computer. Those had to be written. And all of the first customers for the Apple, for the most part, were developers, people that were now just buying a computer that worked and figuring out how computers could be used in the home and the office. It took 4 years to get to VisiCalc, and at that point there was enough out there, enough things you could do with the computer that the average person could go to the store and be like, well, why do I want one of these things? Oh, it's got games and spreadsheets and all kinds of different stuff. So I think we're in that phase right now of robotics where enough technology is coming out, like natural language processing and computer vision, and the processors are coming into a form factor, size and power that we can actually put them in our robots. And then also the consumer readiness with devices like Amazon Echo and being familiar with voice interaction with smartphones and devices like that. I think we're just at the beginning of that phase where we're going to start to get robots out to developers, and then, I don't know, it could be 3-4 years before we have enough applications written that robots will actually start to really move into the consumer space in people's homes.
Yeah, I mean, for us, for VR, I think, VR has similar challenges, although, different in that in terms of adopting virtual reality, there needs to be all kinds of new things built. Tools for creation of content, the content itself, consumer behavior has to change. We consume content through devices today. We have a very defined way of doing it, in that we've kind of optimized it to all be within about a square inch on our phone. And that's a highly optimized system that we've developed, and a behavior around that, and it's attached to us at all times. And so from a VR perspective, it's a new paradigm in terms of human-computer interaction, and you start to layer all those things on top of each other, and you get a lot of friction. And so we've seen, over the last 4 or 5 years, there's been, started out with panoramic photographers who are creating virtual tours of apartments, and now it's the biggest movie studios in the world creating game engine content and fully interactive and long form, and there's a real market forming around that, and not just in entertainment, right? Like, people are starting to use it for real enterprise use cases, training, education, architecture, things like that. So it's a number of things that all have to rise at the same time in order for adoption to really happen. And we're seeing it now. I mean, on PlayStation VR is probably the best example of a successful VR headset. And our app on the PlayStation VR, people are spending a couple hours in our app just hanging out, watching content, or we have a theater mode, so people can just be in a VR theater, like having a personal IMAX theater. And so it's the little increments of people, early adopters coming in and really using it and introducing it to more people, more content, more tools. Probably the hardest thing is the behavior change, and so we've seen that morph pretty rapidly over the last few years, but it still has a few more years to go, for sure.
Just a final point to add on top of what Ian said was, robots have been coming for a long time, and I feel they're finally here. If you look around at the number of people that are interested in what people on this panel have to say for whatever reason, you start to get that feeling. So it's not just the amount of funding that's pouring into the space, or the infrastructure that's now been built. That people are not starting to take security of IoT devices seriously, or the government kind of legislation that are being put in place. If you talk about driverless cars or something like that, but in the consumer space itself. So around the time when I was born, or from the stories I've read, when internet was starting to get quite big, and computers were taking off. Eventually, the classes I was studying were IT, information technology, so learning to program and excel and things like that. So I think you start to get a feeling for consumer readiness and kind of penetration into the market and industry in general when it starts to make its way down to education, when people seriously think, okay, this is going to be a big part of our life and we have to do something about it. So it's not just about coding anymore. It's STEM, because software is built on hardware all the time. That's at the simplest level what a robot is. And so a lot of schools, a lot of governments are now trying to make sure that that aspect of their economy is covered, so that they're not left behind. And I think that's a strong indicator. You'll get robots in every home, but the developers that are going to come behind that are really going to be the young people today that are going to build that.
So the three of you guys, your companies, and even the company that you had originally, Jen, were all, they were toys, right? And I actually had somebody say to me the other day that when you look at consumer adoption in these spaces so far, largely what we've seen so far is toys. Is that accurate? And if it is, what's going to happen that's going to move robotics and VR and AR from toys into not toys?
I think some of it has to do with the capabilities of the robot. Navigation is a big one for us, knowing a house or an office and being able to map that space so that the developer can say, go to the kitchen, go to the living room. And then once it gets to the living room, be able to do something. So computer vision, different stuff that we're able to run locally on the robot now is more and more. And then of course the capabilities of the cloud side with different services out there from Google and Amazon and Microsoft. Is pretty incredible, like the context you can give to the robot today. So I think it's those technologies that are going to take it beyond toy, like computers, right? I mean, I have one of the original Red books for the Apple II. They called it the Red Book. It was the manual for the Apple II. And you flip to page 11 and there's like the Breakout game. And then later versions of Apple came with the Star Trek game on a cassette tape. But it was all gaming that started computers as well. And then obviously moved into other things.
Like, there's nothing wrong with play, right? We all start with play, and then we go through phases of learning, and then we eventually have to grow up and get a real job and be productive. Like, robots are the same as kids in that respect, right? They're all about play now, but throughout our lives, we maintain this need for play and exploration, and I think it's encouraging to me that one of the earliest functions that we've successfully developed in robots is the ability to play with humans. Playing well with others in swarms. Like, I'm more interested now in group behavior in robotics. In single function robotics, group behavior, programmed group behavior. Things like wayfinding and that can be amplified with more robots at a smaller scale. Like, that kind of development is really interesting. I also think, like, let's not discount the importance economically of play. Like, two of the companies up here came through Disney. My family is a bunch of Disney freaks. I'm wearing Mickey earrings right now. My mom's gonna love this. But like, one of the best AR VR experiences I have ever had, and I've seen a lot and demoed a lot, is the Flights of Pandora ride at Disney World. Has anybody else been on that ride? Where you ride one of the Banshees? Yes, okay. That stuff is amazing, right? Like, amazing. I almost threw up amazing. So like within certain environments, like let's say education, let's say hospitality, let's say entertainment, let's say medicine, those areas we're already seeing adoption outside play into learning and productivity of robotics, of AR, and of VR. The question is really like, are we going to be capable as designers and engineers of developing things that are low enough cost and have a singleness of purpose that enable more and more people to put them in their homes and feel safe? Like, the security aspects of these kinds of devices, I think, like, we're still on like this scary kind of black box like playground there, and we have a lot that needs to be figured out before we'll be able to grow truly beyond a playful utility.
Tony, one of the things that Jen just brought up is the whole concept of costs coming down. We're starting to see untethered headsets at the market. Like, costs are starting to drop. Like, when you think about the greater accessibility to the headsets, what does that mean for entrepreneurs working in the VR space in terms of the opportunities that it opens up?
Yeah, I mean, the last thing we want is the cost to be a barrier. I think if we've seen anything that, making the cost zero with Google Cardboard, for example, you can play around with some experiences in Google Cardboard, but they're not all the way there. But that single moment started kicking off a bunch of development just because it got it into more people's hands and it showed more people the value and the potential of it. And so, you know, certainly bringing the cost down helps, but, you know, it is also still on the developers to create something that's compelling, right? Like, the fundamental question is, how do these things improve our lives? And, you know, same thing with robotics or VR or AR. You know, if I'm lazy, I don't want to vacuum the floor, like, let's get a robot to do that. Or, like, you know, if I can walk around in a building before I actually build it. I mean, one of the best things we did at Disney was go in the cave, which is, you know, a full surround projection room that basically you wear these glasses and you can walk around in the room. It's like a giant, you don't even have to wear like a fully immersive VR headset, and you can see what it's like to be on a ride or be in the park, or, you know, you're using the technology to, you know, solve a problem, and not only does that make the lives of the designers better, but it makes the consumers' lives better. And so it's like the adoption ends up happening. It ends up being less about cost and the developers finding the reason why this is making our lives better. And so, you know, Google Cardboard was a great example, but what happened? Like, brands started throwing their logos all over it and doing like 30-second commercials. That's not making my life better. You know, it's like a cool little novel thing, and the price is $0, so it's cool to like kick things off and start to show people what we can do. But there's the next level of like, all right, now like let's make people's lives better.
So Silas, you've been working on Mechamon for a couple of years now. You got, I don't say finally, but you got Mechamon in the Apple Store.
Yeah, finally, yeah.
Which was awesome. Like, talk to me a little bit about what have been the biggest challenges as somebody developing a consumer robot between kind of when you first came up with the idea and finally taking that robot to market?
Big question. So I guess one of the big challenges for a startup is like not dying, basically. So you've got a lot of things to balance, right? You know, the funding aspect, creating the product itself, getting to market at the right time, and getting to market the right way. A few of the aspects you have to consider. So, and the bigger challenge is when you're creating a consumer brand as well. So, and if your long-term goal is creating a consumer brand, then the expectations are really high, and you know there's always a pressure to try and drive and just get the product out there and then fix it later. There's a concept of MVP in the startup world. The MVP that consumers want to see is a lot. It's much the barrier is quite high. So, for example, if you really want to build a consumer brand, there are lots of ways to get out there. But if you want to move out of the kind of coders and hackers and stuff like that and build a long-lasting consumer brand, you have to do a lot of work to get that right. And you know, we took our time to do that. That's why it took us 4 years to get there. But what came out at the end of it was a product that's worthy enough to be installed and on demo in one of the strongest brands in the world. So I think for consumers, definitely the threshold is much higher in terms of what they want to see and the experience that they want to see. And for a startup, the trick is to try and get that right. You still have to try to get to market as fast and as efficient as possible. If it were down to us and we wanted to build a perfect product, we'd still be in the lab for the next 2 years. We'd get it right, but the industry would have moved on. What we have is a product, and we have customers that love it and are happy to give us feedback so that we can then tweak it. But we haven't given them a 3D printed robot. We've given them something that we've taken to production, we've de-risked it quite a lot, and then they now have something that has a unique experience around it that we can build on top of it.
So, Jen, one of the things that Silas brings up is he can spend another 2 years working on his robot and get where he is. As an investor for Foxconn, you see a lot of hardware that's going to be on market, 2 or 3 years down the road from now. Like, can you share some kind of like broad brushstrokes on the types of things that are coming to you guys right now that you're taking a look at? Like, I think you might have like a really good insight on what 2 or 3 years from now is going to look like.
I could tell you, but then I'd have to tell you. I start? We are definitely seeing development both on the enterprise and consumer side in the sectors that are here. We see a weird mixed bag of what I'll call like the divide between, let's say, assisted whatever, like assisted navigation, assisted home, assisted grid, and autonomous navigation, autonomous grid, autonomous home, autonomous robot. And right now, like a lot of our business units are focused on the assisted products because those are the ones that big brands are bringing in and they're selling relatively well. But the stuff that I'm really excited about is the stuff that's still too early, really, for a Foxconn or a Pegatron or a Wistron to kind of touch. I'm really interested in things that improve problems like agriculture, so kind of smart ag, advances in nutrition science, aided genetic therapies, particularly like RNA-based therapies. My background before robotics was in healthcare, so I still like that field. Fox does some of that in our limited divisions. We still see the bulk of our stuff is still the consumer technology of 10 or 20 years ago. It's laptops, it's some desktops, it's phones, and from the manufacturing perspective, it is a cajillion peripherals that tap into those things. Even though those are standalone products from the company side, like from the manufacturer side, we're like, no, they're all sort of driven by or attached to or controlled by, these three main devices. So I just keep waiting to see, the companies like Sphero and like some of the other AR and VR companies that we work with or starting to work with now that are developing like truly autonomous independent systems and products, but it's much slower than you might think. Yeah.
And Ian, that's kind of like where you guys are going with Misty, right? Like, you're building Misty for developers. I imagine that there will be a peripheral market for Misty at some point in the future. Tell us a little bit about what you think about kind of like Misty or any other robot as a platform in the home.
Yeah, I mean, that's our big goal, right? The robot that can cook our food and clean our houses and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, you need really complex manipulation and stuff to do that, but I think we're at a stage where we can actually start to do some useful stuff in the home today. I was just thinking, like when Silas was talking about, he was talking about price points and stuff like that. I think one of the things, my hypothesis in robotics is that we're going to kind of go down and then back up. So right now it's a little bit expensive as technologies become cheaper and cheaper. The price of these robots is going to go down. But then as we increase the capabilities of the robot, a lot of that's driven because robots are using motors and need metal and things that have, there's finite resources on Earth. Computing power is just going to get cheaper and cheaper, but the mechanics of what you need for a robot that can manipulate the real world is going to get more expensive as we need to put more manipulation in the robots to move things around in the world. So, and of course in the future we're going to have self-driving cars, and you're not going to buy it, like right now, a car for a family is one of the major purchases.